22 years ago, Steven Spielberg made a movie called AI, Artificial Intelligence. It was a $95 million film, and it featured a futuristic robot child who was the first robot programmed to love. And the motto of the movie was, his love was real, he was not. It's very interesting because this movie put across a very simple yet deep message. The world is changing, but we are not. And I was invited here by your impressive, prolific, and prestigious Professor Dalvinder Singh and Joy Malala, and to speak about the future of the Commonwealth and what the Commonwealth as a multilateral organization of 56 countries coming together, not all of them sharing the past of being colonies of the United Kingdom, but perhaps 51 of them do share that past. Others were never colonies. If we think, for example, of Mozambique, Rwanda, Togo, Gabon, in a way Namibia, it's very interesting because the world is changing, countries are changing, democracies are changing, but institutions are not. Governments are resistant to change. And when I mean institutions, I don't think only of parliaments or judiciaries, but also schools, offices, corporations, universities. I mean, what's the future we will have to handle? 155, 56 years ago, the first international governmental organization was founded, and it was the International Telegraphic Union, then, now Telecommunications Union. And it was formed because it was the first time in history when the speed of information was faster than the speed of man or woman. Okay, the speed you could communicate was faster than the person who could run the marathon in Athens, or in marathon actually. And you say, well, it was put together so that countries could somehow articulate what they were sending and receiving in a harmonious way and could not, would not disrupt somehow that speed of information. And of course, many other multilateral institutions, organizations came up with time, like the League of Nations that then died before the Second World War, etc. And then the United Nations. And since 1945, the mushrooming of international governmental organizations have been incredible. There is an organization for anything and for everything. These organizations were put together to link countries as a way of connecting them for specific reasons. Now the world has changed, and now governments are together automatically through social media, for example. I know that most of the presidents or prime ministers of the Commonwealth are in a WhatsApp group and they share information immediately. So if I can share information immediately, and this is cheap or free, or almost free, because when you are in WhatsApp and WhatsApp is for free, that means you are the commodity, okay? You are the price. You are paying yourself as a price, your data, your interest, whatever you do, whatever you like. So if this is for free, why do I need to fund an expensive organization in Marlborough House, one of the palaces, royal palaces, next to Buckingham Palace in London, which is prime property, which could be rented to one of the biggest corporations in the world and pay 10 times the amount of money? So why should I spend money in a secretariat when I'm connected immediately? When I can tell the president of Gabon, can tell the president of Guyana, hey, Guy, how are you getting your carbon credits? I hear you have succeeded in getting $230 million through the sale in the market of carbon credits. I have not managed. And then Guyana says, okay, let me send you the forms. and that's it. So what's the future of multilateral institutions in these settings? Well, why speak of the Commonwealth, for example, and why sustain it alive? You know, it's an organization of 56 independent countries, many of which were former colonies of the British Empire, and the rule of law, democracy, and freedom is key to this organization. If you have a coup d'etat, you are sacked, immediately suspended, you are out. It happened to Maldives, it happened to Fiji, to Pakistan in the past. They have all come back. One of the countries left for different reasons, Zimbabwe, they now want to come back. So, and there's a long list of applications, countries that want to join the Commonwealth. It's incredible, it's a long queue. I would say, why should countries in the 21st century, when they can connect directly, would want to come through an organization that perhaps is an expense for them and doesn't fit somehow the immediate needs of the 21st century as it fitted the needs in the 20th century or the 19th century? Well, it's very interesting. It's a question I ask myself always, but there is something interesting. These organizations create an interaction that perhaps could not be created virtually, and create a kind of peerage that cannot be replaced by a computer. As I was asking myself that question, and the beauty of shared values and diversity, and what brings together that fantastic Caesar salad that is the Commonwealth, I found a beautiful poem and a poet who puts it like this: our path entwined in fate's embrace, our destinies forever interlaced, two souls bound by threads of time, a shared journey, a rhythm divine. We traverse the world in tandem, through valleys deep and mountains grand, our footsteps echoing in unison, guided by destiny's master plan. In moments of joy we laugh as one, in times of sorrow we mourn as none, for our shared destiny, a bond so strong, endures the trials both short and long. As the sun sets on our journey's end, our souls forever intertwine, my friend. For though we may walk separate ways, our shared destiny, a memory that stays. Ladies and gentlemen, I am disposable. I am no longer necessary, and my job can be performed by anyone with more accuracy, and that anyone is ChatGPT. Okay, the ideas I have put across until now, and the poem I just read, took me 3.5 seconds in ChatGPT. The world has changed, but we have not. So ChatGPT composed this poem. It's not a famous poet, and it's original. I passed it by Turnitin, and the poem has never been seen anywhere else. So I could claim that it's mine, but it's not. ChatGPT gave me the ideas of how the world is changing that I have been telling you until now. Some of them I enrich with my personal experience. But you see, it is shocking how ChatGPT, even more advanced versions like 3.5 or 4.0, gave me, wrote for me even a beautiful novel, okay, a 2-page novel on an imaginary person called Sarah, who was going through trouble in her life, and it was a horror story. And when I asked ChatGPT, summarize this for a tweet, it did it for me, and even created a hashtag, okay, Sarah Horror. And you say, well, I could have tweeted this, I didn't. I could have tweeted this, and people say, wow, oh, amazing tweet, incredible, 180 characters, you really picture the horror of Sarah. But it is not true. I didn't do it. Somebody did it. Who is that somebody? And if this creates terror or horror, who is responsible? Whom will I grab from the legal point of view and make guilty or declare guilty of something horrible? If the person who has coded these algorithms has done it in a way that will enhance extremism, which is one of the things we are seeing across the world and in some Commonwealth countries, okay, terrorism and extremism and violence, and you say, well, whom do I look for and declare the guilty person? It's very interesting. We are going through an amazing transformation never seen before. Coca-Cola, a few weeks ago, and this has gone viral, created the first, what they consider the first ad that is fully AI generated. Meaning, you see real people, they don't exist. These are all generated actors and actresses and spaces. And it's beautifully done. It's in a museum, and the paintings, which are paintings of real artists, classical paintings, are throwing the bottle to each other, and at the end, the student drinks it. Beautifully done. I say, well, wow, this means in the future of our arts and cinema, we will not need any more spaces, expensive shooting spaces. You don't need Hollywood anymore. You don't need actors and celebrities anymore. The Oscar will be won by fictitious persons, because you will have this Joy Malala who was created maybe 20, 30, 50 years ago, who doesn't grow old and is fictitious, doesn't exist. And she's performing in all the movies, and maybe she has a series like The Crown that has been running for 50 years and is still there, and is perfect, and nobody knows Joy Malala that is younger or older, or Luis Franceschi, or whoever it is. So it's very interesting, because in the same way this can be used for the better, it could be used for the worse. So something that a panel of experts did for Dell Technologies in 2017 was to predict the jobs that had not been created and will be created by 2030. And they foresaw that 85% of jobs had not been created. And when you start thinking of it, you say, well, in a way it is true. Now we have social media experts, social media directors in corporations, in companies, in newspapers. The shape of communications have changed, the shape of newspapers, of law firms, because now they hire social media experts. You have influencers. They did not exist. They were created. The first influencers appear in 2018. The New York Times published a newspaper mentioning influencers. And in a way, this is quite interesting and quite challenging. Now in Kenya, according to a new finance bill, influencers will be taxed for their earnings. I say, well, but I am just sending tweets. Yeah, but you are making money, and some of them are making millions, and they will be taxed. So it's very interesting, nostalgists. Okay, this is something I didn't know existed. Well, these are interior designers and decorators who make sure that they decorate your flat, if you are an 80, 90-year-old person, as it used to be in the 50s or 60s, so that you live your back in your times and you are happy because this look like it reminds me how it was when I was a young person. And there are very many like that, telesurgeons, garbage designers, people who redesign garbage spaces because we have an amount of garbage we cannot deal with anymore. Simplicity experts, people who come into corporations and redesign systems to reduce them. In the Commonwealth, we realized we had 194 steps, bureaucratic steps from conception to execution of an idea, okay? And Mark Albon, one of my colleagues, told me, Louis, if you want, I can help with this. And he identified the steps and is trying to redesign this to summarize it to 15, 20 steps without jeopardizing transparency. And then, of course, you have Zoom trainers. TopTal is training people on how to use Zoom in all its capacity, and they have a 3% pass rate, okay? Maybe in future they will be training AI itself, and AI will all do it for us, but the whole list goes on. Genetic counselors, telehealth nurse and doctors, mental health specialists. It's no longer a psychiatrist. No, this is a guy who is specialized on mental health problems arising from the use of mobiles, computers, social media, etc. 3D printing specialists, blockchain developer, engineers, etc. In Africa, I used to joke in Kenya, saying that, and I heard this from a fantastic comedian, a Nigerian comedian, we had 4 professions, 4 possibilities in life. You were either a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a disgrace to the family. Well, this has changed. And now you can be anything, and anything can make more money than any of the traditional professions. The world is changing quite fast. I mean, we live in a world where the 6 biggest companies in terms of capitalization did not exist a few years ago. If we think of Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Tesla, I mean, these companies were nowhere in the picture. And Apple's economy is bigger than Africa and the UK combined. Then you say, my God, and 40% of the minerals of the world are in Africa. Well, this is a huge shock. Now, of course, the world is changing, but education, governments, and justice systems are not. And I will focus on these 3. E-government, e-justice, and the transformation of education remains to be done. And wow, there is in the Commonwealth a 2.5 billion people market waiting for this. So in this sense, Warwick University, one of the leading universities in the world, not only in the Commonwealth, has a huge responsibility. I'm not inventing that you are one of the leading universities in the world. I even asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told me, yes, of course, Warwick is a leading university, and told me incredible campus, research facilities, depth of knowledge, and this and that. So you see, the revolution Uber caused in the transport industry, well, is a revolution that is going to happen in government systems, in justice systems, and in education. So Uber put somehow the person who had the need with the one who had a car or transport together. And in future, they say, well, it's not just that you want a taxi or a car, your personal driver, to pick you from A and take you to B, but it's that if I want to go to London now, I say, well, Uber, take me to London, and Uber will get a car to take me to the train station, automatically from the train station to London, and from London to my destination in London, okay, to Marlborough House. And even more, I can say, Uber, I want to go to Nairobi or to Kampala, and Uber will take me from here to the airport, from the airport, the plane ticket to Nairobi, and from Nairobi to my home, all combined under one package. Okay, this is already in the making, and Uber is already offering. I'm not advertising Uber. Okay, there may be little. There are very many different companies doing similar things, but this revolution is real, and in a few years' time, it will happen without people. Self-driving cars, or self-driving, I mean, whatever it is. We have people like Elon Musk causing also, for example, a revolution which can go both ways in the information sector. Musk has been telling people that we are going to Mars in 3 years' time, okay? And he's sending these rockets with Starlink, SpaceX, sorry, up there, and then the rockets come back, and they are reusable, and this is very good for the environment, fantastic, and we were all happy and clapping for the guy. Wow, finally somebody is doing something for us to go to Mars. But really, in the process whether we go to Mars or not is perhaps irrelevant. What he has been doing is bombarding the space with satellites. And he has 3,655 satellites on orbit, which is 50% of the satellite power information in the world. So one person with one company, Starlink, owns 50% of the information that goes all around the world through satellite. Well, that is a huge responsibility. And, well, the same happens, perhaps the same will happen, what happened to taxi drivers with Uber may happen to Vodafone, Verizon, T-Mobile, etc., with Elon Musk. Because if he decides, and he's already doing it, to connect phones directly to satellite, there is no need for anybody to have a local provider. And sometimes we say, well, this is something good, it's cheaper, it's nicer, it's neater, and you cut the middleman or woman. Say, fantastic, but who somehow subject these people to equitable and fair rules of the game? Where is the game? Because the game may be virtual, may have been created by artificial intelligence. I mean, is that the legal parameters and systems we had created until now are no longer applicable in the virtual world, in what we are creating, or what is being created by artificial intelligence. So we were talking with Dalvin of the exogenous and endogenous shocks that he is studying in depth. Say, well, is that the shocks now we are facing, apart from the exogenous shocks that come from pandemics and hurricanes and etc. Well, now we have a shock that is constantly being created and augmented somehow by a trigger we lost control of. And this is leading quite a number of countries, well, in the right direction, but of course there is no light without shadows, and there are quite a number of countries that may also be going in the wrong direction and are becoming more invasive. Now, to put it simple, I said, well, government, education, and justice is changing drastically. Education, well, COVID pushed us to flip the classroom. How? Well, before you had the lecturer giving a lecture, and then the students trying to understand and asking questions. And now the work that was done by students is done by the lecturer, and vice versa. So we are recording lectures, students can see them at their own time, at their own speed, and the slow minds or more reflective ones will have to see it 10 times. The faster ones may see it once, but everyone is at the same level. And when they come to class, it's just to resolve questions, to resolve doubts. But they all have similar doubts because they all have caught up. So it makes it more equitable. It's very interesting. Now, of course, what is happening with AI? And I have here in my computer AI-generated image, is that, well, perhaps we teachers are going to disappear because we could create, the AI could generate a teacher who doesn't exist and could be of different heights, of different colors, complexities, races, adapted, speak any language. I mean, I was in NVIDIA 3 weeks ago in San Francisco, and they were showing us, well, I mean, the incredible, not avatars, because they look so real, and they are not avatars of anyone. It's just a generated image of a person who doesn't exist, but who was speaking 60, 70 languages. And this could become the teacher. And this person is teaching the class. And when the students come and ask questions, well, this person will be answering questions, but it's not a person because it doesn't exist. Okay, it's a computer-generated teacher. Well, is this where we are moving to? Perhaps, who knows? But the fact is that COVID really introduced dramatic changes. If students who had never agreed to sit in front of a computer to listen to a lecturer speaking through Zoom did so. Lecturers who would have never agreed to teach through Zoom had no choice but doing so. And of course, what we are realizing now is that it's not enough to just appear through Zoom and give a lecture, because that's boring. So I think, for example, of Sony Pictures. They made $200 million last year, but Sony Gaming made $22 billion. So perhaps we have to go through education through gaming, okay? And it will be a game, and it will be so addictive that students will be, maybe mental problems will come because they are excess of learning. Okay, you are going through gamings and you are so excited and so embedded. When I was teaching the law school in Nairobi, and we gave every student a computer, that was part of the revolution, and that made the university not stop when COVID hit. Some lecturers had the idea, well, now, guys, no computers, close your computers, forbidden. And phones, no phones. And I said, look, it's interesting because now teaching is a huge challenge. It's like for soccer players, footballers. I mean, you have become an entertainer. You see, it's not just playing soccer, it's you are entertaining. And 4 weeks ago, we had Aubameyang from Chelsea. Before, he used to be in Arsenal. I don't know why he made that erroneous move. But he came to the Commonwealth to give a kind of get-together, very informal, and we were talking. And you see, he said, well, look, I'm an entertainer. I know when I come in the field, I have to score a goal, but sometimes I don't manage. But I have to entertain people because I'm paid to entertain. And I said, well, teachers have become entertainers. So when people go into the computer or the phones, at that moment, you have to realize you have become more boring, so to speak, than the phone. So you are realizing, hey, I'm not connecting. They like the phone and the game and the message more than the teacher teaching. So what do I have to change to make sure I remain as engaging and exciting as the phone, okay, to which many people are now addicted? Well, it's very interesting. To move faster, of course, there remains the aspects of critical thinking. Perhaps it's not replaceable, at least not yet. And also the aspect of character, prudence, courage, self-control, justice, humility, magnanimity, the traits of character that only a real teacher can embed or transmit to the student. And those are the aspects that I find it very hard to think they will be replaceable. Then if we look at justice, we'll say, because these are challenges we are seeing now through the Commonwealth, and you will see how this ties up. E-courts, of course, is becoming the norm. People want e-courts. We have begun a program in Uganda, and it's catching fire through East Africa, and will expand to the Caribbean and to Asia. The Pacific is already asking for us. Vanuatu was telling us, hey, we need this. You see, we have so many islands, and they are so far apart in the Pacific, in the middle of nowhere, that we need law boxes. The law box is a container. It was started by Barefoot Law, a group of young professional lawyers in Uganda. It's a container, shipping container, which has Winnie, an artificial intelligence dispute resolution program, a virtual court, and a mediation center, a table where they do mediation, etc. They resolve disputes of land, family disputes, domestic violence issues, how to start a small business, how to register your everything. And they are connected by solar power and to the grid. So they can also see weather pattern, commodity prices, etc. It's so empowering. And this was supposed to be movable from village to village. They have two problems with the law boxes nowadays. One, to move it. The villagers will ban it if you move it because they don't want it to go. It has become the new shopping mall point of connection. And the second is storage. They get so many goats, maize, chicken. People bring all sorts of gifts because it's for free, and then they are so grateful that they feel they have to bring something to them, and they don't have storage facility. So they don't know where to storage, to keep these goats, to chicken, etc. It's a fantastic initiative, and we are trying to help them and build a manual so that this can be replicated across the Commonwealth. Well, you see, small claim courts application, things that now you don't go to court for 100 or 1,000 pounds, because going to court for 1,000 pounds is more expensive than what you get, than the award. So it makes no sense. It's like going to a petrol station to put 1 cent. Well, there would not be a petrol station for you to put just 1 shilling, because you can't pay for it. You have to put 50, 20, 40 pounds, and then that makes it a business. So it's very interesting. So the small claim courts app, people put in their claims, and this reaches a judge, currently a person. Perhaps in future will be artificial. Well, in some places they're already trying with artificial intelligence judges, but it's risky because we are not there yet. And a resolution is made, a decision is taken, and that's it. Well, eBay has a dispute resolution facility that resolves on average 60 million disputes per year. And you say, well, these are 60 million files that do not go to a law firm or to a court across the world for eBay. Say, well, this is something we have to think about, because many times we think we lawyers are indispensable, and Richard Susskind, an incredible innovator and author many of you have read, and he's a fantastic human being, he says, remember that lawyers should not think like the people who sell drills. You see, when you buy a drill, what do people want? They don't want a drill. They want a hole in the wall. Okay, you are buying that hole, the machine that will make the hole. So when people get lawyers, they don't want lawyers. They want justice. They want a business contract. They want something, but justice, the lawyer is the instrument to drill that hole. And in governance, there are very interesting things happening. Of course, they're having quite a number of innovative issues or things happening across the whole Commonwealth. If you think of Kenya M-Pesa or Airtel Money across East Africa, and in many places now is perhaps more common. But even other issues like AI ministers. Why should a president have human beings who are prone to corruption as cabinet ministers and not AI programs that can give him the right advice without charging bribes to anybody and not be exposed to corruption? So is that a possibility? Is that coming? AI police, AI judges? Well, some governments are going into predictive AI suppression, okay, which is scary. And they are buying from other countries somehow programs that allow you to suppress revolutions or discord before it happens. Because it's so simple. Now that you have the way to analyze all that mega data that is reaching, well, that you say, well, this person is going to start a revolution, so let me stop him or her before it happens. So again, we began with the movie of Steven Spielberg of AI, and perhaps we will end up with the other movie of Steven Spielberg of Minority Report, where people were detained before committing the crime. Or like that famous series, I think of Netflix, that was called Person of Interest, where people were saved before they got into trouble because the machine was giving the numbers, social security numbers, before trouble somehow happened. Well, it's very interesting. It's somehow scary, it's fascinating, and it's happening. It's already here with us. So AI is changing the world in education, finance, law, health, art and media, scientific research. It's also interesting. And at NVIDIA, for example, they told me it used to take 5 years for a PhD researcher to produce a molecule to get a new vaccine. Now we can produce 5 molecules every 6 months. And the more the machines do it, the faster they can do it. So what are the limits of invention, innovation? It's scary. Well, the world is changing. Our institutions are not. This is a huge challenge. We have lost the capacity to delay gratification. We want everything now, immediately. I mean, I call it the Toblerone principle. In the past, Toblerone was only available in Switzerland and in some airports. Now, even in Kenya, in Naivasha, in a store that is in the middle of nowhere, I have found Toblerone. Coffee was available, well, only for certain very expensive shops and the like. And coffee, of course, you have to be in the tropical countries to have coffee every day or after every lunch or every hour. Well, now there are 2 billion cups of coffee consumed every day. That means something like 2,000 super tankers moving around every day in the world in the coffee trade. So how much pressure that puts on land and on our seas is just coffee. I mean, here we're not talking of hot dogs or hamburgers, but how much pressure that puts in our land, in our systems, in our nature is something scary. I sometimes say, and with this I will finish, that we may end up becoming VINI, V-I-N-I, that is vegan, indeterminate, naked, and immobile. Vegan, because, well, the world is realizing there's too much pressure, so let's go vegan. And 15 years ago, nobody knew what the term vegan, only few people knew what it meant. Now everyone in the planes, they put even vegan, not vegetarian, it's just vegan. And there are some absurd things, I think, at least. I'm not a scientist, but vegan bacon. I am not sure how vegan that is, because for sure it takes a lot of energy and effort to create that bacon. But anyway, indeterminate, yes, because we cannot identify by gender anymore. That person has to tell you he or she, etc. And toilets are no longer male and female or anything like that. So we are falling into a space where you don't want to determinate anything. Naked, because fashion has become unsustainable. In the past, big shops and enterprises would change fashion every 6 months. Now, and then became every 3 months. Now it's every 2 weeks. Well, that's a strain on nature, and the kind of garbage we produce is unsustainable. So now people are fighting for sustainable fashion, and some people are already advocating for painting. So no, forget about producing clothes. You will paint yourself, of course. If it is cold, you have to wrap up, but that's naked. And in mobile, because what was good in the past, traveling, cars, buy a bigger car and you are doing better, now it's becoming a huge environmental sin. So you having a car, oh no, unless it is an electric car. But of course, when you have an electric car that is powered by electricity produced by fossil fuels, you are in trouble. Okay, nobody knows how. And something interesting I was being told there's a company called Magway, which have taken the concept of Hyperloop that was being built in the US for passengers and simplified for goods and transporting goods. So it's a 1 meter pipe that moves goods from A to B and C very clean and in a very efficient way. And they are already here in the UK, and they are doing tests between cities and within cities. And of course, it may become the norm. Why? Because they realized that despite the introduction of electric cars, emissions had not reduced. And why? It's because as electric cars were introduced, delivery also increased. Deliveries of vans, for example, for Amazon, and home deliveries. So of course, all this has created a situation where you have to think of delivery of goods in a more sustainable way. So there are very interesting happenings, but just to finish, say, well, we began with AI and with Steven Spielberg's movie of He Was Not Real, but His Love Was Real. Well, when I think of the Commonwealth, I say, am I disposable? Says, in some ways, yes. Institutions like the Commonwealth, multilateral institutions could easily disappear in the sense that their functions can be replaced by AI systems put in place and communication systems that are now in the world, but that human touch cannot be replaced. During COVID, many of you experienced the fact that you could sustain relationships, but it was really hard, if not impossible, to create new relationships. So in the last 18 months, we have prevented, and I am very happy to be in this with the Secretary General in this team, we have prevented 4 civil wars. Practically, I mean 4 collapses of 4 countries across the Commonwealth in a beautiful way. I said, well, this could not have happened without the human touch. And the last miracle I can mention happened in Sierra Leone 2 weeks ago, when the president and the opposition leader shared the stage and shook hands, and this was televised, and the country was very polarized for elections. There are still tensions, and the elections are happening at the end of June, but certainly was a step in the right direction, because these 2 leaders showed the whole country that, look, you who know each other do not have to kill each other for the sake of those who know each other and don't kill each other. So you don't have to die for us, because we are not enemies in that sense. We don't have the same ideals or ideas, and we have different ways of looking at governance and systems, but it's not worth killing yourself for the sake of us who don't kill ourselves. And in that sense, multilateral institutions remain being engines of change. And I think that change, together with AI, could move or should move in the right direction.
So there's so much there that I kind of wanted to ask a whole series of questions. But the first one is, so if we don't do art, and we don't do creation, and we don't do poetry, and we don't do film, or law, or science, or government, that kind of creates a picture of a future in which there's not a lot for humans to do, you know. So if we're not educating lawyers, for instance, then what work is there to be done, right? So there's two then possibilities. One is that kind of old socialist utopia of abolishing work or reducing it to a very minimum. And the other is the kind of much more dystopian view where actually the things that AI and robots are not particularly good at are, you know, often the kind of most difficult jobs, like cleaning or, you know, picking products off shelves for Amazon. So it's the jobs we least want to do, perhaps, that the robots and the AIs are less interested in doing for us. And so there's a kind of dystopian world in which all of the joyful work, perhaps, disappears and is made into robotics and AI, and all of the worst jobs remain for us to do. So I kind of wanted to push you about how you steer that, how you navigate that, and you know what sort of work or worklessness is there in this kind of future that you're projecting. The other question I had was about government, right? And because that seems like a really interesting place in which you had a moment where you said that you could have a prime minister or a president being guided by AI ministers. But I mean, we could go the whole hog, right, and say, why don't we have AI sovereigns? And in fact, perhaps a much more rational system would be to have all of the governments as AIs. And if that's the case, then perhaps, I mean, and maybe this is utopian, perhaps even that human touch where you prevented the wars that you came to at the very end, maybe that's not necessary, right? Because if AIs are coordinating at a governmental level, then will there be war in that context? You know, like, so the example that I think sometimes the law and technology people use is around car crashes, and car crashes happen because of humans. And if all of the cars are run by machines, then car crashes don't happen because the machines know what the other cars are doing and they stop in advance or whatever. So you have a kind of a coordination system there. So I guess the question then is about the role of the human in this kind of post-human world that you're painting, and on a kind of quotidian level, what work will we do, where will we have to work, and on a much bigger level, how far do we go with like not just the governance of AI, but AI as government?
Very good questions. You know, with the first one, I would say the way I picture it is similar to what happened to the horses and the chariots when the cars were invented, or the train. Because you say, well, what will happen to all the horses? Of course, well, the horses became luxury items for playing in the fields or for polo, or for managing cattle for the people who have big farms and the like. But certainly, while 150 years ago, buying a horse, an expensive horse, was something of status. I mean, my horse was a pure breed, etc., was incredible. Nowadays, it's a Ferrari or a Lamborghini that makes me a kind of give me status. So I think something similar may happen with plus and minuses. That is, well, if before my job was, let's say, cleaning windows or floors, and now these robots have been invented, well, my job may become the one who repairs the robot, because there is always an element of humanity that cannot be replaced. An intelligence outside the machine that is still needed. When we were in the law school years ago, one day I was positively impressed by a group of students whom I met, law students, and I met them with their laptops and they were busy typing furiously. Say, hey, what are you guys doing? Said, Python. Say, wow, okay, this was not witchcraft, was not a snake. It was a program, artificial intelligence programming feature that they were using to build something. Say, well, it's very interesting because when perhaps we did law to run away from mathematics. And we did law because we were better in humanities than in sciences. But perhaps in the future, things will change. And you will do law, and law will lead you to somehow perfect the AI for dispute resolution. So your job will not be as much as understanding the law to apply it, but trying to improve the features of those programs that have been built to resolve disputes. So it's very interesting. It's like what has happened to people who work at home. In the past, it was a very simple thing. I mean, to cook and hey, now you have to be an engineer. You have to know how to use the microwave and the washing machine and I don't know what, etc. Everything is electronic. So the level of knowledge has jumped. And in Africa, it was quite fast, because I think we went from firewood to the microwave immediately, and from no phones to the mobile. So it's very interesting how we can adapt so quickly. In the issue of government, you know, there is always, I think that certainly our decision making will improve hugely, aided by the machines. But remembering always that the machines are the product of, at least there has to be a trigger at the beginning, which is the coder, the person who builds the algorithm. And in the same way that a painting is not just light, but lights and shadows, I think humanity has its lights and shadows, and this makes it unavoidable that there are people who, as we created the computers, they created the viruses. So I think this fight between good and evil is something that will always be present and has been present in humanity. It's perhaps a mystery of life, but we have to live with it. So that's why I doubt there will be a machine that will be self-correcting, or all the machines will be self-correcting. For some reason, we have that evil inclination among our coders and programmers, who there's always somebody who tends to create the virus or the evil thing or the easy way out to get something. And that's how money laundering, theft, etc. happens. We were talking to Prof before on the issue of bank robberies. See, in the past, it was very simple. You grab a gun or a car, go to a bank, point the gun, get the money, get out. Now we don't see that happening. Many movies were made, but now we don't see it. However, by the end of January, all the 42 banks in Kenya had been attacked and robbed through cybercrime. Nobody saw it, nobody said it, because for the banks it's cheaper to put in their budget that loss than to announce it, so that people don't lose trust in them. But of course, I constantly get from HSBC fraud alerts. And it's interesting how sometimes I have sent my money to countries in Africa and they block it. And I said, but I sent money to the US yesterday and you didn't block it. So how are you blocking it now? Well, because there is an issue of trust. And if that mistrust is embedded in the program, the machine itself mistrusts Africa, because the coder had a positive bias against Africa, because maybe too many people had been conned with supposedly African accounts. But anyway, this is the challenge, and I think this challenge is not there to go. And of course, the aspect of the human touch, I think, will be still necessary. Will it be like happened in the Matrix, where people are on a bed and sleeping and they are just connected to the Matrix? And I doubt. I mean, I don't think we will get that far, but who knows? But the human touch is always, I feel it is not replaceable, at least not yet. We hope.
Yes, so kind of building on from Ilan's question on the future of work, which I guess is more or less the dystopian, utopian question. And a few years ago, I wrote a chapter on the future of AI and the future of work. And we were kind of tracing what technology has done, because technology is not just AI, it's even automation, it's machination, it's all these things, and we were tracing it historically. And this sort of happened in the 20s in the US, when telephone operators were quite a good source of employment for mostly women at the time. And with the introduction of the answering machine and automation, all those jobs decreased. And then women had to find work elsewhere. So in that same vein, I'm wondering, in regards to the Commonwealth as an institution, an organization, an arbiter, what do you see? Because I think you've sort of foregrounded the importance of AI. How do you see the Commonwealth changing in this future making, in this future political space? Because part of its founding is not so much the practical change that it has, but also political. So can AI be political in that sense, as in the same way we understand what politics does, but because it's not just process. It's also the way we have symbolic leaders, the way we have state or sovereignty. How do you see your role, and I guess the Secretary General's role in that future?
Yeah. Well, thank God I'm not a prophet. You know, I see it in the same way as I see, for example, the future of arts, is that art cannot be done away with. Although you may change the actors and the modes or the ways of going about it. So when I spoke of this Coca-Cola advert, you say, well, those actors do not exist, but there is somebody behind who coded, at least initially, them. They were created by artificial intelligence, it is true, but there is somebody who asked the question to the machine. In fact, the question askers, to speak it like this, apparently are becoming one of the best paid jobs in Silicon Valley now. So the person who is an expert on asking the machine the right questions to get the answers, they are hugely paid. So this is something that did not exist before. So it's very interesting, because I see the job of institutions like the Commonwealth, or like my role in the Commonwealth, as precisely that you may not be the actor, but you have to be the person who triggers the change, who triggers the movement of what the AI, computers, etc. will do. The day before the coronation of King Charles III, we called for a meeting of leaders of the Commonwealth, and the 56 countries were represented. Rishi Sunak was there, Albanese from Australia, Hichilema from Zambia. All the presidents or prime ministers came, most of them. A few of them missed for technical and logistic issues, and they were not coming, or they came late. But on short notice, all these leaders met, and we had a beautiful meeting where there were no officials. It was just the presidents and the Secretary General and the Prime Minister, so President, Secretary General, and myself in representation of the Secretariat. We were 58 people in that room. And the conversation was so human. Of course, we don't usually speak of what they discussed because this was a private meeting of heads, but was so human and so warm and so candid that made me realize, yes, we may replace how we bring them, how we elect them, how democracies function today may not be the way they function in the future, but you cannot replace this human meeting of leaders who are telling each other things that are helping them in a human way. So that's what I think is not tradable. It's something you can change. You can change the systems around, but I don't think you can change that beautiful human interaction they would not have agreed to have, even if it was a perfect virtual meeting with holograms, would not have the same effect. So that's how I see it. Certainly the type of conversation, the subject may change, but we have a huge challenge currently in the Commonwealth, and is that the face of democracies are changing. You see, if you have a coup d'etat, you are thrown out, okay, of the Commonwealth, or you are suspended until you go back to democracy. It doesn't happen in other institutions. But today, the problem, like happens with the banks, is not the coup d'etat. It may not be the army taking over, but it's the not an even playing field, or is the capacity of manipulation of governments. We may still call ourselves democracies because it's the rule of the majority, but how have you achieved that majority is a difficult problem. How much have you manipulated, or other people have manipulated on your behalf, is a huge problem. How have these votes been counted? How really free you are is something that is, in some cases, difficult to measure. We did election observation in some years ago in a country, and I told the team, look, we cannot continue doing observation like this as we did 40 years ago when election observation was invented by the Commonwealth. That was very manual, physical. We went there, experts, we saw the people voting, we went to the counting center, we saw the votes being counted, and the result announced, and we say, fantastic, the election was free, fair, verifiable, inclusive, transparent, etc. But now, well, in some countries, you put your thumb, and then you press a button in a computer, and that is the vote, and you don't know, you don't see it again until it is announced. So how do we know? And I told them, you have to have among the observers experts, analysts, data analysts who can get into the servers and see what's happening inside there, understand it, and say the election was free. These votes are real, they did it properly. And also you have to have analysts who can see who has been manipulating these elections. In some country we discovered that a lot of manipulation had come from inside the country, and servers had been hacked, etc., from some neighboring countries, and then surprisingly from the US, from China, from Russia, and 2 or 3 other countries. I don't know if Israel was one of them, but certainly these had been companies, guns for hire, kind of, who had been hired, kind of Cambridge Analytica, that, okay, Cambridge Analytica itself disappeared, but not the likes, which have mutated. And these have been hired to create fake news, distort opinion, fake pages, but very well done. And these scientists managed to map all this in a perfect way, and we presented it in a report to the government. did not vitiate the elections, but certainly how do you measure it and what's the impact? Because it's very interesting. We cannot guarantee success, but we guarantee failure by giving up.
Thank you, and I must disclose on a light note that I am a Commonwealth scholar, so I know I should be careful about what I say.
No, don't be
On a
careful.
light note, so I have two questions or comments or points. My first is on democracy. Being Kenyan, I'm from Kenya as well, and in our constitution, there is they say that sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya, and any authority that is exercised on behalf of the people, including judicial authority. So the judges and the judicial officers are exercising their authority on behalf of Kenyans. And in the spirit of wanting to give the people the authority to exercise what is theirs in the first place, our new Chief Justice, not so new anymore, was really active in engineering the alternative justice system, where communities are given elders, community elders, to adjudicate over matters within their locality. And there was a debate, I believe it's still ongoing, about the modalities of how the alternative justice system panels are going to work, because the idea is not to reproduce a formal system, which we have had for years, but to have a sort of sui generis system which is attuned and special and peculiar to the communities in the country. And in this sense, so in terms of AI and justice, I was just wondering whether the Commonwealth has given room to accommodate the realities of different countries and the communities in those countries, because we can see that while there is a push towards embracing technology and the Kampala, the project that is going on in Uganda with the Winnie the box, but there's also a very tangent stance of people wanting to be connected through their community elders, and what makes the communal way of administering justice spatial is that it's not born out of legislation. You know, the laws and the customs of the people are written in their minds and within them and passed on from generation to generation. And so perhaps the Commonwealth can address its mind to the realities of the communities. And then the second point, I feel like it is a belaboring, because in your presentation you have acknowledged that there are limitations as to what AI can do in terms of instilling character and values, humility and compassion and all that. And but maybe I could just emphasize, because my thesis is on higher education, and one of the arguments that I make is against the human capital theory, which is about making students go to university for the sake of getting jobs, because the feeling is that there is more towards higher education than just the instrumental role that it has to play. And I was having a conversation with someone who was telling me that what students value most is a lecturer or a teacher who believes in them, who is able to bring out the best out of them. And so it's not only about the information or the content of the curriculum, but also the human connection, yes, which you have already acknowledged cannot be replaced by AI. Yeah, so those are my 2 points.
Good.
We're beginning to run low on time, and there's a load of hands after going up. So I wonder, are you happy to take 2 questions? And then
Okay, perfect.
Thank you for the wonderful and provocative and thought-provoking discussion. So, just carrying on in terms of what you said about the human touch, which is still required in terms of dispute resolution or conflict resolution, and linking it to what you said about ADR, perhaps as well. That one of the things that we experienced when we initiated ADR projects and organizations in places like Pakistan was that people don't just come to dispute resolution authorities to resolve disputes, but also to vent out, to get that human connection. And access to justice projects or e-courts can replicate the dispute resolution part, but they miss the justice or the empathy part of the dispute resolution mechanism, which in a way paradoxically creates the need for humanity or human connection within the law and technology or the embedding of AI within law. So that was just one point. But the other thing, in terms of what you said about governance, there seems to be a paradoxical relationship between governments, I wouldn't say governance, but governments and their approach to AI and to social media and to new technology, which means that they understand perhaps on the whole the wider value of it in terms of economy and so on, but at the same time there is a distrust of it, which means that because people ultimately reside in geographies, as soon as there is a danger, the governments tend to sort of clamp down on social media, or clamp down on technology, or access of people generally, which obviously affects the economy, but it affects more the interhuman connection across borders. Do you see this changing in terms of governance paradigms? Can this change come from changing the way that we engage with governments, or the governments engage with social media, or do you think technology itself can provide maybe an outcome or a solution to that?
Judges and ADR, alternative for traditional dispute resolution. You know, from the Commonwealth perspective, we don't have, you see, we are a public institution. So this is like, imagine a taxi driver. He cannot have an agenda. His agenda is the agenda of the client. So an NGO will say, okay, I am here to go to Kensington. Okay, that's my agenda. As an NGO, you are entitled and you do it. But as a public institution, you are here to drive people wherever they want to go. It may be Kensington, it may be Chelsea, it may be anything else. So in that sense, we don't have an agenda. We are driven by the agenda of our 56 countries collectively. And of course, these countries always are very proud and they defend their local context. So we have to be very respectful. So when we create something like the law box, of course the law box is not our creation, it's the creation of Ugandan professionals. And they are happy to share it across the Commonwealth. So we are like the people who take the magpies, and the Secretary General always says that she was collecting treasures from the Commonwealth and sharing it with everyone, which is a beautiful thing. It's what a family does. So the alternative or traditional dispute resolution mechanisms are essential for a society, especially to keep that identity. Part of the drama we have gone through in the world is that when we copied or we were imposed institutions by colonizers, once the colonization or the let's say, the period of colony, being a colony, ended and countries got independence, they inherited these institutions, which were inherited not in spirit, but only in structure. So, for example, the parliament of Uganda, Nairobi, Kenya, Tanzania, etc., is not exactly, it's not the parliament of the UK. And the discussions that take place there are very different. And the MPs, who are supposed to be lawmakers, are mostly lobbyists for the road, for the schools, for of their constituencies. I say, well, but you are supposed to be a lawmaker. Why are you concerned with Harambes and building this road and building this school and raising money for? Well, it's part of the inconsistencies of having inherited institutions that, well, were not locally created, but which also can bring benefits. So my approach in that, some people speak of decolonization. Well, it's interesting. To decolonize in that sense should be, let's see what we have learned, what we can remain with, and let's remove what doesn't work for us, but let's keep what works for our society. And that's a very interesting discussion, because I think and I feel it's what the Greek did, is what the Romans did, is what the Europeans did. You see, every empire that was born took from the old kind of power whatever worked for them and removed what didn't. That's why English is 40% Latin, okay? Because, well, we took the words and whatever worked and removed what didn't. And many of our institutions, in fact, common law is based on Roman law, really. And you say, well, why? Because, yeah, people remain with what worked for them and remove what didn't. But of course, it cannot be just for the sake of efficiency. There's a human element, empathy, as you mentioned, which is very essential. And that, I don't think it can be replaced. And the same happens in education. You see, yes, there's that empathy, that formation of character, which I spoke at the beginning, and that's why what I think will happen is that things will take a different turn. You see, the transmission of knowledge perhaps will be perfected and will be done in a more perhaps attractive way for the future generations by AI robots or persons through screens. But of course, the formation of character remains human. I don't think that is replaceable, at least not in ways we can yet see in future. We all need someone who listens to us, who is not a robot, because many of us speak to robots when you call, for example, your mobile provider, you speak many times to robots, and we are not happy about it. But yes, we need people who listen to us, who understand us. That aspect of human empathy is important. So it's not just efficiency, because that will be the just radical capitalization. No, it's that humanity also needs that space. And with AI, we are encouraging governments to go into AI. You see, it's not stoppable. It's not something you can say, no, here, no AI, let's block ChatGPT. No, but it's not just ChatGPT, it's everything is going through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what we have done is we have signed a collaboration with Intel and Simply Learn, and they have offered us 10,000 to begin with, which is worth $100 million, spaces of machine learning and artificial intelligence for senior public officials, permanent secretaries, directors, etc. level. And then Simply Learn has given us also 10,000. Now they open it even wider, where young people in the 56 countries can learn AI and machine learning. at a different level, I mean, at their own level. But, well, this is partly what we are doing because we have told leaders this is not a change you can reverse. Okay, if you were thinking that this would not happen, it is here, and it's here to stay. And it can bring very many benefits, but precisely you have to train people to use it in the right way for this to be beneficial. Because if they use it in the wrong way, it will not be. But anyway, that's the risk of democracy. Democracy is a huge risk. It's beautiful because it's the rule of the majority, but the majority doesn't guarantee the right decision. If you put 100 fools, they will not make the right decision. It will be a big foolishness. So education remains key.
It's absolutely fascinating conversation you started. I guess on one level, a lot of the discussion around genetics, that means the ability to modify human nature, pushed us to create ethical and legal frameworks to control that. But the mistake we seem to have made is that we not ask the same kinds of questions when it comes to AI and its ability to change our thinking and modify our behavior. So is it now too late because it's left that period where we try to do it, and I'm not in that area, but it appears to have been the case that when that point of science evolved, there was these ethical questions asked, which appear to perhaps be very intrinsic in medicine and science, but we haven't asked that same question when it's come to these issues. And you've spoken very eloquently about the ability of states, individuals, companies to influence and think, change our ideas. And it seems that that's even more powerful than what was at the point of science being able to modify human nature in one way or another. You know, it's frightening.
Yeah, it's true. I think.
Should we take everyone's questions?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Still flowing from the governance framework. So what form of governance framework is the Commonwealth proposing for AI, particularly where you're looking at the fact that the world is changing, institutions are not, and also the fact that AI also has its flaws, because we all proclaim AI as being incorruptible, but AI could also be corruptible. So what's the middle point position that's there in between people's participation, like you mentioned, that the humans are the commodity and data surrounds what AI uses, the algorithms are built on data. So would the governance framework be around that perspective, or will it be around the slow government or the slow institutional framework, or will it be looking at self-regulation of companies, which also is danger, could cause a danger? So in all, what's the middle position between protecting excessive powers, either of the people, of companies, and also probably the lack of power of the government?
Yeah. Good. So, going or answering or trying to answer the first question, your question, Dal, which is very interesting. I don't think we are too late. Precisely that's why we want to teach AI to those 10,000 senior public officials across the 56 countries, so that they get to understand AI and the implications, and they will also be able to handle your question. Why? Because part of the problem is that you cannot measure what you don't know. I mean, you cannot regulate what you don't know, what you haven't measured. So part of the huge drama in today's governance if the governments go on to regulate what they have not measured. It goes by, and it happens at all in all ways. I tell you a very quick story. It happened maybe 15 years ago in a university in Kenya. A projector was stolen, and somebody says, "Oh my God, we have to put burglar-proof grills all over the building." And I ask, "Hey, how many projectors have been stolen in the last 10 years? Well, only this one. Okay, how much does it cost to put burglar-proof all across the building? Well, it will cost perhaps £100,000. And how much is a projector? £500. So why don't you just put in the budget that 10 projectors will be stolen every 10 years, and it's much cheaper. In 100 years, you may spend what you are spending now in putting burglar-proof." So it makes no sense, and those are the wrong reactions governments fall into, to regulate things they don't know and they haven't measured. So I think it's very important that that understanding exists, so that they know how to regulate it and what is to be regulated. And then certainly in the Commonwealth, we don't want to push or present any package made for our countries. What we want them is to understand the principles, the new technologies, and then come up with solutions that they themselves understand and work best for them. So we don't want to fall into the same mistake that happened 100 years ago, when they were given, let's say, parliament and judiciaries, which did not fit into the structures of traditional, for example, justice. We want them to discover what works for them and apply it in whichever ways. Also understanding that the world has changed radically. I mean, for example, who has the power? Where is this data, for example? Can I regulate something with the boundaries of my country when in machines there are no boundaries? I mean, when people tell me, "Oh, we celebrate because Trump was thrown out of Twitter," I say, fantastic. I mean, you may not have liked Trump on Twitter because he was quite annoying, the way he was using it and governing through Twitter. I say, but who threw him out and why? Where was the decision made, and what redress did he have? Because if it happened to the most powerful man on earth when he was president, it can also happen to you and me. And where do we go? Okay, if something happens to me that is unfair in the UK, I go to the courts, and the court will redress the issue. But if it happens to me with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, where do I go? Where do I complain? Who will resolve my problem? And who made the decision? And that person is not elected, but yet Facebook has twice the number of citizens than the biggest country on earth, that is India or China. And there are citizens who have registered there willingly. Okay, they don't pay taxes, they don't pay registration, but they are the tax because they are the commodity. So it's very interesting how the whole relationship has changed and how complex it is to regulate it.
That feels like a really nice place to finish the talk. So thank you very much for coming.